My name is Rhiannon Beauregard. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, certified sex therapist through AASECT, and AASECT supervisor in training, and a specialist in problematic sexual behavior. And I kind of split up this presentation in like two ways. One is like getting to know me and the work that I do as like a meet and greet, and then also I'm sort of going to try something out with this group about the work that I've been doing with online therapy. The PowerPoint is on SexTherapy-Online.com/presentations. It actually has this PowerPoint. It has a link to a little video tour of my home studio, which is, I'll talk a little bit about how I made the decision to work from home. Heather, you could maybe kind of do, I have a privacy screen on this, so I don't know if you can see it from far away. SexTherapy-Online.com/presentations. And the presentation stays on my website, so you can reference back to it. And it has a variety of other links, including the most recent regulations from Texas MFT board around online therapy, which is kind of hard to find, honestly. So you can reference that for as long. I'll keep that on that page forever. As well as all the ethical codes and guidelines on telehealth and teletherapy, online therapy, distance therapy from all of the relevant boards. Because we'll talk a little bit about like getting into online therapy and getting good at online therapy. So there's a difference between like seeing your client online because they're sick or they're traveling and actually doing the work. And I've been doing this for a long time, and that's kind of what I want to like sort of propose as how I actually believe that my modality, online therapy, is not just delivering services online. It's actually a model in and of itself, where the main interventions are using the internet and using technology. I by no means am like a scholar on this, so I'm open to the feedback, and I'm really just sort of like tossing this out to see if it feels like it fits right. So, okay, so I talked a little bit about me. So I'm licensed in 5 states, Maine, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, New York, and Texas, and I pretty much isolate my practice to those states because there's plenty of work to do. I do sometimes have some alternative arrangements that I'll be kind of transparent about with people who are working abroad, expats, or people that live abroad. This is a really big gray area, and we as sex therapists live in a really big gray area anyways, so like I kind of have a high tolerance for risk, but I can talk a little bit if we have time about how I justify working with international clients. It's not something I advertise or I say, but I do have a few clients that have permanent residences in one of the states I'm licensed in, but are working abroad. Some of those countries I have attempted to contact and make sure that I'm falling within their regulations, but the majority of them are Muslim or Arabic speaking countries, and that's where it stops. So, but we can talk a little bit more about that. I work from home, which is really cool. I have a home studio. I probably would have never done that early in my beginning of my sex therapy career, but it made a lot of sense when I was working online and transitioning between in-person and online clients. So the majority of my practice is online, but I do see quite a few clients in person, and most of my Austin clients I call like hybrid clients, where they'll see me sometimes in person, sometimes online. They'll adjust their schedule to meet with me like once a month. Some of them prefer in person, but online is necessary when they're traveling, or just to keep the continuity of care aspect. So I have sort of 3 arms of my business. It's evolved. Initially, it was just direct client care, so just giving therapeutic services to individuals and relationships in the states I'm licensed to. But now I do a little bit more on supervision, mentoring, and training. I am a CEU provider for Texas and AASECT, and like a couple other states, but I have to look up, like, not actively doing CEUs in those states. I am an AMFT approved supervisor and an AASECT supervisor in training, so I have a small supervisory business. People contact me, I don't really promote myself that much about it. And then I do online mentoring. So people who want to get into online work will often have a few sessions with me to just like how to get their business started, how to get the technology working, how to market their clients, and how I've been successful in my online work. I kind of mentor them and kind of grow them so that they can bring this as an aspect in their practice, or their practice kind of alone, so like a solo online practice. So there's this client care, supervision, mentoring, and then media. And so as an online therapist, I'm really big on bringing media and promoting like the field of sexual health and wellness. So I have a podcast. I do a weekly segment called Fetish Fridays on YouTube, which is really popular, where I just talk about a different fetish each week. It's actually like the most popular thing I've ever done in my life. The feedback I get from Fetish Fridays is just so reinforcing. People are just so grateful to learn about like what the freaky shit is. You know, they all want to know like, what's the weirdest stuff you've ever heard? And Fetish Friday is kind of like the place where we can talk about that. But it's also really nice to be able to expose different populations to different aspects of sexuality that they might not otherwise be exposed to. Like I had a client last night that watched the adult baby diaper loving breastfeeding videos and decided to try that and sent that to their partner and posed that as like, this is something I'd like to try. So it kind of gives a forum within my clientele and beyond to kind of share like, this is interesting, I'd like to try this. It's really funny to see what my partner has to say each time he watches the Fetish Friday. And like, so he'll be like, no, maybe. And I'm like, come on, let's try all of them. And he's like, no, maybe I do that one. And really like my greater mission, like what I feel like I was called to the field of sex therapy. I felt like this was just a calling from someplace outside of myself. And my greater mission is to change the way we talk about sex. I think fundamentally it's our stories and our communication around sex that is keeping us locked in a cycle of shame, misinformation. I talk a little bit more about kind of my model of online therapy around that. So, okay, if you're on it and you scroll it, I just wanted to show you what my home studio looked like, because I think we're so used to office environments, and I think this is actually an essential part of my online work, is having a comfortable space that I'm comfortable in, and also my clients, I have noticed, are super comfortable at my house. I never considered my clients like to just lay down on the couch and relax. Like they'll put their feet up on the ottoman. It's a different vibe. They're coming to my home and they are just way more ready to be relaxed and comfortable. So I just put a few pictures of my office on there. It looks like kind of like a little living room. There's no like waiting room, no one has to worry about, and that's the beauty of online therapy too. Like no one knows that you're going to the online sex therapist, and also when you're coming to my house, nobody really knows what you're doing either. Like there's no signage, there's no promotions. It's just you're pulling into my driveway, you're walking out back, you're petting the cat, and you're coming into session. And I really, really like the vibe. Just the space is really healing. I don't always think in the millions of offices I've had in my in-person practice, I've never had a space where I felt like my clients relaxed as much as they do in my home. So I really, really enjoyed that transition. The next picture that I put up there is my little reclining studio. My little reclining workspace and my therapy dog. You can see she's like ready to work right there. But so a lot of people want to know like, how do you do it? And I will say, doing it hours and hours and hours a day, you really have to watch ergonomics. So this is important. Is it like, because your neck and your back and the sitting and the way we pull our necks forward, it really, really does matter if you're just looking at a screen all day. You know, I know everybody's like, yeah, you're right, you know, and as therapists, I've had back surgery about 4 years ago. We don't understand how much our bodies do go through because we're being inactive and we're sitting, but your chair matters, your setup matters, everything matters. And so I actually have a reclining workstation, which it looks like a lawn chair, but it's a special French-made zero-gravity chair. And it has a laptop, like a rolling laptop that kind of tilts back. So it tilts me all the way back. And you can't tell that I'm not sitting in an office chair. It just looks like I'm sitting in an office chair. but it takes a lot of pressure off of my back, takes a lot of pressure off of my neck. And when you're staring at a screen for hours and hours a day, you really have to think about those setup. The other thing I'll mention about my that photo is the lighting. This is really important in online therapy, that you have quality lighting. And I also believe in online therapy that your setting should be free of your crazy and clutter. Because I have definitely like sat on mentoring sessions with my mentees and seen like underwear like in their bedroom, and just like there's just chaos in the background. And it really does matter. If we're creating a healing space, what's in your screen matters too. So you'll see I just have like one, I think I have my AASECT certification behind that. There's a bunch of licenses there, but I think that's the one that shows up. It's just a simple thing. Another factor I'll talk about is glare, because you want to make sure, like I have a privacy screen on here, but the glare with the setting that with your lighting and glare is a factor to think of too. So you want to be able to create the space on the screen doing online work that's just as calming and peaceful as your space in your office. So a lot of us don't think about that.
So you have that like natural lighting coming in on the side, and
just a regular like ceiling fan light above, but the natural lighting on the side and the ceiling fan above. I have in some of my videos that you see online, I have really warm light. Those are actually just 2 shop lights when I set up my recordings. I'll just set up 2 shop lights with LED light's important, and a light behind me. So you can play around. You do not need to invest in expensive lighting. The best is natural lighting, truly. So when you're thinking about the space to do this in, it is best to have the natural light and a simple light above you. But play around with that, because part of that is creating that kind of soothing environment. And if you have if you're super dark backlit, it's more challenging for your clients to not be distracted by whatever lighting that you have. And a lot of people do struggle with where the space is. I mean, I don't have to mention the confidentiality of making sure that your space isn't a space where people can't hear you. I use an Apple mic. I have tried probably about 15 headsets on the market, and nothing is better at sound quality than the Apple mic from the Simple headphones. It's the best at eliminating background. And I didn't like that look. I felt like I was some sort of teenager on the bus playing a video game on my phone. But it's at this point it's so normal for me. But no headset was better than the Apple mics. And I think a lot of times because of the sound quality of your voice, but also being able to hear my clients and what it picks up. Because the Apple mic really depends on the mic. I have an Apple headset mic that picks up everything. It'll pick up a creak in my chair, but that's when I don't like to use that much because it's too sensitive. But it will eliminate any of that background noise. So if the landscaper shows up and starts blowing and blowing and blowing, it's something we're used to in an office environment because we don't have control over it. But when it's in your home, all of a sudden it becomes a huge distraction. If someone's cooking in the kitchen and I'm online, if they pick up any pots and pans, it's super distracting for me because I'm what is going on out there? But gratefully my clients can't hear it. But so I also make sure that I don't see any clients at home unless the house is empty. So I really only see in-person clients between 9 and 5. And then online I will have a less sensitive mic. I have a solid wood door. Airflow is sound flow. So when you're constructing the confidential space, making sure that you're weather stripping and making sure that wherever air can come in, sound can as well. So when you're creating your home studio for online work, to make sure that you're weather stripping around and doing your tests too. I have original hardwood floors, anything is creaking. And online, it doesn't distract me, but when I have an in-person client, it does. So, okay, so let's get into just the general definitions. This slide's important because when you're looking up information, every single board and licensing organization, everything says something different. They call it something different. Telehealth, telepsychology, telemental health, online therapy, distance therapy. Texas MFT board calls technology-assisted therapy. It's important to know those because as you're looking up information or resources or courses or whatever that you know that it's called all of those different things. I just use online therapy, although it does include, I do phone, online, and text. And text is not like this, it's like a chat box. Like I don't have the patience to like do this. And my clients don't access me that quickly. It's like a live chat through my video conferencing platform, kind of like what like AOL would be, or like any live chat. I've only used those in a few exceptional situations, usually when there's a expressive communication issue, like a stutter. That's the only time I've ever really used those, but it is an option. So I'll go to that side in a minute. I use a platform called Secure Video. It's a paid-for platform, and it's a little pricey. And the reason why I use it is because part of our requirements if we want to do online therapy is that we need to assure that comfortability with technology on our end and their end. And this is what most of the ethical codes say. Like, you need to know what you're doing with your technology and with theirs. And so I have no way of really knowing what like their 1997 Windows desktop computer is doing, or their ability with their internet connection. In the states of Maine and New Hampshire I work in, internet is really bad. So oftentimes we'll supplement with audio on the phone and video, like delayed kind of video on the computer. But Secure Video has a 24-hour support line. And I have like one client whose presenting problem is technology-related rage. So that client literally calls that support line every single time we have a session. Like every single time it doesn't work. But like I can't troubleshoot. Like I had a mentoring session with another online therapist a couple days ago. She does this full time, I do this full time, and her mic didn't work. So like there these things come up that you just have, like you can't, this is why I use a pay for service versus a free service, because I just don't have the capacity to troubleshoot for people's computers. And some of the free services like Doxy.me or Counsel, or I don't know if anybody else uses VC, some of the freer services don't really have that access, and that's why since I do this full time I pay for the service. Another asset I like about Secure Video is that it changes the time zone based on the setting. And so I work in a lot of different time zones, and my clients really appreciate the reminders in the time zone that they like, you miss out on that kind of confusion. The backup program that I use, because Secure Video, there's a business associate agreement for HIPAA compliance, and that's essential that all of your digital anything, your email systems, your electronic health management, your video conferencing, it all has to be HIPAA compliant. The backup that I use is new. It's Google Meet. So Google Hangouts is not part of G Suite. So if you have G Suite, which is designed for medical and mental health professionals, googlemeet.google.com is a HIPAA compliant video conferencing. So let's say I wanted to just test the waters here, and my client was going out traveling and I just wanted to try. I would go meet.google.com, and make sure my G Suite has my business associate agreement, which is so easy. Google just makes it like you click it and you've signed it. And I would use that as just a trial, like just to try it out. And that is my backup. FaceTime and Skype. Obviously, I don't have a BAA with any of Skype or FaceTime. You could use those, but because I just do this so much, I want to make sure I'm as compliant as possible. So meet.google.com is the second one that I would use, but Secure Video is pretty much what I use. Any questions so far?
Do you find people pay for the service as well?
No, Secure Video comes with a link, and they just click on the link. The first time they have to download a program, it's super easy. It's just like downloading an app. They'll enter my waiting room, and then when I'm ready, I just pick it back up. So it's totally free for them. That was the other thing. Rather than, they don't even have to create a login or password. They just have to click the link, which again, clients cannot for the life of them remember passwords. Like how they function, I have no idea. So I have no idea. But so Secure Video really takes away, like they don't need a password, they don't need a username. So it's a lot easier. I think it's worth the money. And I do an unlimited thing, so it's $50 a month, but you can pay like for less than 3 times a month for like $5 a month.
Is meet.google.com, is that
So G Suite is the paid for kind of email system through Google that separates you from like your traditional Gmail account that you got for free and your business therapy account. So, and G Suite has a business associate agreement. If you go into admin.google.com, you have access to the Google console. If you have a free Google account, you do not have admin privileges, so that would lead you nowhere. They say you need to pay. G Suite, like the suite of the Google, has the business page and keeps you in compliance. I think like $5 a month. This technically would be that you'd be able to send emails through your G Suite Gmail account that is HIPAA compliant because you've signed a BAA, which was a big problem a couple years ago, but now we've figured that out. So you may be able to use meet.google.com without having G Suite, but it would not be HIPAA compliant unless you signed a BAA through your G Suite. So you would not be in compliance using the online work unless you have the G Suite and have the BAA. So my email marketing has the BAA, which is Constant Contact. I mean, there's MailChimp. All of those things need the BAA because you've got your client's contact information. G Suite, this secure video, my electronic health records management, and like we can't really use like an app like Calendly, which is like what a lot of people use because of our protected health information or the contact information. We just have to take that extra step, and I have found that the Google products, to me, honestly, they have worked extra hard to make sure that whatever HIPAA compliance is what they do. So you may be able to use Google Meet, but it wouldn't be HIPAA compliant unless you have that BAA. Any other questions? Okay, so the thoughts to consider, I'm going to go over these. This is just like a general sort of overview of online therapy. I believe when you do online therapy, you need to consider the legal, ethical, risk management, and quality of care, and none of them are more important than any of the others. We tend to get really hot on the legal, and that's not any more important than risk management, and not any more important than actually doing good services, and not any more important than our ethical code. So I'm not going to weigh down in the legal because the boards are generally afraid of online therapy. This scares them. Just like sex therapy scares them or like HIPAA scares them. Like online therapy freaks them out. But Texas is really clear on its laws, which is that if you're licensed in the state of Texas, you can see clients that are in that state. And generally, most states say that therapy happens where the client is. So you need to be licensed in the state where the client is. Not all states, but most states say that. Question sometimes comes up that where are you sitting? You need to be licensed too, okay? And my general recommendation is I am only licensed, I am licensed in the state that I'm in, and I'm licensed in the states that I work in. Sometimes there are exceptions, but that's not like, it's not like I'm licensed in some others, like it's not like I live in Florida and I'm seeing a client in New Hampshire but not licensed in Florida. Because Florida actually has said, if you're gonna do therapy, we don't care who it's with, and you're sitting in Florida, you need to be licensed in Florida. So I don't want to get too bogged down on that because if you're licensed in Texas and you see clients in Texas, boom, just like start with that. When you start crossing jurisdictional lines, you do open up a little bit more risk. And this comes down to risk management, which is, this is only a problem if someone complains. Because states have just, the best thing to do is follow the Texas regulations. Texas says, and Texas gets in a little hot water about this, but because Texas says we don't care about anybody in New Mexico, Louisiana, Oklahoma, Arkansas, we don't care about them. We don't care, we only serve the residents of Texas. So I wrote recently on the AASECT listserv, and I can post it on this event page, a little bit more about how like states don't want to be bothered with other people. Like if a client from Florida wants to see you and you're licensed in Texas, you're sitting in Texas, Texas doesn't care about that. Florida cares about that because Florida cares about the client there. So my suggestion would be like learn to tolerate a little bit of risk in the gray area, but generally if you're licensed in the state that the client is sitting in and you're licensed in the state that you're sitting in, just don't worry about it, you're fine. You follow the law, you're fine. It's these gray area exceptions where you need to maybe justify it and make sure you just do a little bit more due diligence to make sure you're following the law. That's all I'm gonna say about that. And the easiest way to do this is call the board. I just call the board, document the board, just email the board and say I'd like to see a client, and they'll tell you, and if they say no, you're gonna, like I had a client from Minnesota call me I called the board said you've got to be licensed in Minnesota to see a client in Minnesota, which most states say that, so I said, I'm sorry, I can't see you. And that's it. Like, I just couldn't. They referred them to someone in our other organization.
So, that, I mean, we're kind of going to the issue where you're saying, like, I have expat clients, but like, if a client is, say, on a business trip, and as long as they're weekly session and they're in a different state, but their home state is when they're licensed in, do you still come forward? Do you?
So to repeat that for the live, so the question is that if a client goes on a business trip and they're in another state and they want to continue to see you, do you have to call the board of that state? So let's say they're going to Ohio for a week and they want to have their session. Certain states say certain things. California very specifically has said it's a no-go. If a California resident goes to Florida and tries to have therapy with a California therapist, the California therapist has to say no. Now, interestingly enough, my liability insurance company wrote a response to that and said, that is ridiculous. We, as therapists, have a duty for continuity of care of our clients. And we think this rule is ridiculous. So this comes down to, okay, so California, the board says can't do it, right? Texas has not really weighed in on vacationing. They really haven't said anything about it. So the real question would be that someone would need to complain. So if your Texas resident was in Kentucky for a week, had therapy, and something happened, then they'd have to complain and say, and she saw them while she was in Kentucky, right? Like while they were in Kentucky. This comes down to risk management, because like what's the likelihood of the complaint? And so this is when you're setting up your sessions with your clients, I always make sure that I have their address where they will be. I need to know where they will be. And if it's from a state that I don't have like a direct access to, after our first session, I will send a sort of a little write-up that says, this is your closest emergency room. If you have a crisis, here's your suicide hotline and your domestic hotline for your state. And I'll give them like this little write-up and this little safety plan at that, because I don't really operate a crisis-based practice. When I work with my clients that are, like their permanent addresses are here, but then they're abroad, I will ask them to give that to me. I say I need someone locally that is your emergency contact that I have permission to contact if something happens. I need your closest emergency room, and I need the name and phone number of your local police department. And I tell them why I do this. Because if something were to happen, like my biggest fear is that we're on like the computer and a home intruder comes in. That's like my worst nightmare. Like generally if your client is suicidal or delusional, you're gonna kind of know that. And that's where the quality of care comes in, because I actually don't think that online work, in my scope of practice, this is not, I would not sign up for a high risk client online. I just feel a little, I have worked with high risk clients, but I worked in concordance with a local psychiatrist or therapist, then they're responsible for their day-to-day care. So that's where like quality of care is. And it's hard because some of our clients that we might work with need a high level of care, but they're in a rural area. And that's up to you as a clinician. If you feel like you can adequately provide therapy to someone who's high risk, then you can take that on. But I'm a sex therapist, so generally they need to have another therapist going on if they're high risk, but they've got something else going on. I really just isolate my practice to sex therapy. But so this is the risk management part of it. Like if I have a client, have I handled like the crisis? Do I have that contact information? And so let's say your client's in Kentucky, everything goes fine. Vacation's fine, they have a good therapy session. They need you because they're with their grandmother and their grandmother's abusive and they have to have a session with you, otherwise their head's gonna pop off. I think you did your due diligence by seeing them. Everything goes smoothly, they come back to Texas, nobody complains, you're fine. There's a little bit of risk because it's a gray area, but you're fine. But let's say they go to Kentucky and they try to kill themselves. And you are seeing them and they're saying this. You need to have a plan. You need to like kind of know. And this is where the ethical code comes into, like the ethics. So that we talked about what Texas say. This is where you need to check your ethical code. And with the marriage and family therapy, and I did not post their best practices PDF, I just post their ethics. MFT, are you an MFT? Okay, MFT, are you?
I'm an undergrad.
Okay, So MFT has, they have technology assistance services, like about 10 items that are in your code of ethics, but they also released an extensive PDF on their best practices. And one of them is they say you have to ask your client where they are located every session. And I think that's ridiculous, and I don't do it, and I'll say that. Because that's not in my, I don't have to do that. That's the best practices, but I don't have to do that. Now, if something were to happen, and the board were to bring it up, I have to defend why I didn't do that. And I feel like this comes back down to like, what's your tolerance of risk? If someone were to complain or something were to happen, I would have to say, I think that it was irrelevant. The client is a resident of the state I'm licensed in. I'm not going to ask them where they're located every single time. If I was aware, I would be honest, and then probably the worst thing that could happen is they would send me a letter and make me do continuing ed. That's probably what would happen. And I'm willing to take that risk to continue care for my client. Because most of these clients that want to do online therapy need to do it because they don't have access otherwise. Now, I'm going to make an argument about why I don't necessarily love that idea in a minute. But so we talked about legal, ethical, so you got to check your ethical code in their best practices. Most organizations have released a document about it. Risk management, so it's not just crisis management, but also ask your liability insurance company. My liability insurance company is really progressive. They're super supportive of distance work. They really are. That's the one that said, this is ridiculous. California is being ridiculous. CPH. Yeah, but just document and just say, like, will you support if there was a complaint of a claim, and just document that you talk to them, which is my general tip. And then the idea is quality of care. So this is where I get into where I don't always think that online therapy is for everyone. And in my experience of doing this for about 6, 7, 8 years full time, that it's very difficult to do certain work at a distance. Specifically, I would say I struggle with couples work where couples are in 2 different places. So it's challenging. Like I have a client that's in Texas and they're partners in New York. I'm licensed in both of those states. Who else is going to be able to see them but me, right? Because I'm crossing jurisdictional lines and licensed in both those states. It's very difficult to do couples therapy when we can do a little bit, but there is a point. So I don't always think, like, for certain populations, high-risk populations, borderline, personality disorders, schizophrenic, any type of psychotic presentation, I don't think that online therapy is the best source of therapy for them. That's just my personal opinion. I think a lot of those people would not normally have access to therapy, but I would not take those on as their primary therapist. In certain couple situations, there's just a limitation of how far we can go when I don't have access to their space and them. And then also, I don't think that all models of therapy, sure, you can have a conversation for 15 minutes through online, but I am big about, like, what therapy are we doing? Like, what's the therapy? I always ask my supervisees, what's the model that you're working on? What's your intervention? Like, I don't want to just talk to them about their day, and I don't want to give them just like little suggestions. In sex therapy world, we have the PLLC model: permission, limited intervention, specific suggestions, and intensive therapy. The PLLC, that's the easy part. That's easy to do online. You can give them permission, you can give them specific suggestions, you can do limited interventions. It's the intensive therapy. That's what makes us separate. That's why we're therapists and not educators and coaches. So educators and coaches do PLLC. We do the IT, the intensive therapy. I don't always think online therapy does great for all models. I'm an experiential therapist by trade, my animal assisted work and a lot of my expressive arts. It's hard to do online. It's hard to do that work. EMDR, hard to do. Any type of touch-based work, hard to do. Anything that uses therapeutic touch or just even being in the presence, hard to do. So personally, what I want to present today is my model of online sex therapy, how I facilitate change through online work, not just how I provide services online. And I do think there's a big difference. Okay, I'm flying through. Okay, so any questions so far? Let's just look at the logistics of online work. Hopefully it gives you, like, whatever you were looking for answers, or reconfirming if you're already doing the work.
This is maybe a bit, do you have, like, problems where people, because there's the barrier of technology, feel like they can say things they wouldn't normally
Yes, but I think that's the asset of the work because sex therapy is so sensitive. I think people are often more willing, and with the barrier of the screen and the space to tell you, versus when you're in face-to-face. As far as like inappropriate and boundary stuff like that, those clients never become clients. I get most of that sort of objectification and inappropriate behavior in the initial intake call, and those are clients that I would not say are appropriate for my online therapy. I've never had a client like masturbate or like take off their shirt or do anything weird, like, because those clients just don't even make it in the door. Like, they'll definitely call. Like, the amount of dick pics that I've been sent, like, is like extreme. Like, and the masturbating phone calls and things like that. I actually should do a whole other presentation about that, because I actually was really activated by the Me Too movement because of the objectification and harassment I felt in this job for the past 10 years. I've been doing this for 10 years. It affected my ability. I found myself not wanting to call back or judging people based on their name and area codes on whether I was going to be objectified or harassed or sexually harassed today. So I'm in a little bit better place about it, sought some supervision about it, but those clients really never materialize. I don't know if you're in experience, like, those are offenders. They're calling to offend. They're not really calling to get help. I don't know if you two have had that experience too, yeah. And oftentimes, if they really are motivated, I have mentees that I'd refer to them that are male. Because generally, I don't know if I've ever had a female sounding voice do that. So I will just say, you need help, but I can't be the one to help you. Okay, so online sex therapy as like, so this is the thing that I'm kind of posing. This is like a little bit like, I don't quite know how much I've cultivated this work and thinking about it. So the idea is the common factors model, which means that all therapy models have certain things about them. Basic principles, the idea of the position of the therapist, how we facilitate change, interventions. Every therapy model could probably tell you how they feel about this. And this is the model of online sex therapy that I use. So sometimes I'm just delivering solution-focused therapy online. This is different what I'm talking about. This is how I use online sex therapy to facilitate change in sexual issues. So you'll have to forgive me, I'll probably read a little bit more because this is like new. So online sex therapy believes that sexual issues occur in real time in a real place, not necessarily in the office, but in these people's actual spaces. And that oftentimes sexual issues occur either on the internet or related to the internet. So it makes sense that we would treat it using the internet. So the idea is that we're bringing the therapy to where the problem exists, which is oftentimes how they're interacting on the internet. Okay? I also firmly believe this, and I don't know if any other model says this, but therapy has to be accessible and convenient. It cannot be a hardship for change. Change is already hard enough. Getting to therapy should not be the barrier. So it has to be also confidential and discreet. People, when they're dealing with this type of level of depth of their inner personness, we can't, like, it's really hard to expect them to like walk and sit into a therapy room. I had an in-person office in rural New Hampshire. It was like a town probably like 700 people. Everybody knew why you were walking in, where you're sitting, and who you're going to see. That's not a conducive environment for change. And that I believe that information needs to be equally accessible to all parties, therapists, clients, partners. The internet makes that accessible. Like, this isn't elite, like, you're the expert, and I talk about that in the position of the therapist, which is the next slide. The internet is not only a resource in service delivery, but actually part of the interventions themselves. It's not just like, this is how we do it. This is the way we do it, and the internet is essential to that. So, position of the therapist, okay. This model is feminist and collaborative, meaning we are equal parties. We have equal access to the internet, we have equal access to the resources and the interventions. It's not, I am a knowing expert and you are the client. It's, we are the same. And we are collaborating on this journey together to create sexual health and wellness. I said equal purveyors and consumers. And sharing and collaborating with each other through the entire course of treatment I learn just as much in online therapy from my clients as they learn from me, because they have 100% access to everything I have on the internet. There's no restrictions. And it's just part of that is facilitating their finding of that information. So this online sex therapy model believes two things about problem formation. One, it's essentially a problem in the relationships with the clients. So it's the relationships to themselves, first and foremost. It all bears down to self-acceptance and self-love and self-worth. Relationships to themselves, relationships to their partner, relationships to their family and friends, relationships to the therapist, and relationship to internet and media. That's where the problem lies. That's the first one. The second is the problem lies in the stories we have around our sexual self and sexual identity. The internet is just one long story of life. Every site is a story. Everything we do on the internet is we seek out stories. Every single thing of our behavior is around a story. And our sexuality gets cultivated by that. And we might not be seeing this in older generations, but we're seeing this in millennials and below. The internet is the fundamental influencer of people's sexualities. That's what the story comes from. Parents raising, but at this point now, the internet is a bigger source than a parent's. So, I'll just read these. Our stories, narratives around sex and sexuality are often formed through lack of information, misinformation, distorted thinking, and a history and culture of shame and secrecy around sex. Sex lives on the internet. It flourishes on the internet. It hides in commonplace, but it lives on the internet. The internet is essential for bringing accurate and current knowledge and theory of sex and sexuality to our clients, helping them to create a more productive and healthy story, but it also, part of the interventions is being able to discriminate what's healthy and what isn't. Because the internet is also a source of a lot of misinformation and inappropriate sexual behavior, and whatever that is determined. I mean, we were talking a little bit about FetLife, you can go down some darkness there. So part of the intervention is learning how to create a story of healthy information and exposure and not that darkness. And part of the goal of online sex therapy is helping them discriminate which is which, what's healthy and what isn't. Okay, how we facilitate change, building relationships between the clients and the partners, family, friends, the internet, the therapist, and themselves. The themselves is that fundamental core relationship. And I believe that technology and the internet at this point is essential for healthy relationships. We are really not maintaining healthy relationships unless we have internet technology. Like, period. Like, you don't really stop by your neighbor's house anymore. Like, you text them. Like, technology is essential for healthy relationships. And as far as the restoring, again, the internet is an infinite compilation of stories. And we use it to cultivate a healthy story. It's the narrative that our clients are telling to themselves. This is my belief. In this model, not all clients I use with this model, but in this model, it's a narrative that people are telling to themselves about their own sexuality that is ingraining the problem. That's the problem. We have to change the story that they're not good enough, they're not pretty enough, they don't come quick enough, they don't come hard enough, they're not adventurous enough, they're too adventurous, too much porn, too little porn. It's the story that they're telling them. And we use the internet to re-story their sexual sense of self. Okay, so the last couple slides I have, and then I'll do questions. Internet's the main source of interventions here. Remember the goal in this online sex therapy model is to change their relationships and change their stories. And so the interventions focus on building knowledge and experience in order to positively affect relationships and develop a more healthy, productive, and accurate story around sex. So I just gave some examples on these last two slides. Surveys, assessments, bloggings, online forum, Facebook groups, social media, literature and information, videos, TED Talks, audiobooks, image searches. I use a lot of image searches. When they talk about the way their sex feels, like how something feels, I'll ask them to search, image search. Show me an image of how that feels. They have an infinite amount of information out there. Show me the image. If we can't describe how it feels, find an image, find a color, find something that represents that. Intervention, sharing your story, writing fiction and erotica, connecting with partners, friends, family, social media, and online dating, chatting, and socializing are interventions that we use to develop relationships with our clients. This is like 1/10 of what I actually do intervention-wise, but it was my mental capacity to just present to you what I just did. So that is my model. That's how I facilitate change. My problem formation is relationships and story, and I use online therapy and the internet And shared media, a lot of times we'll watch it together in the session. It's not homework. It's, remember, because the relationship is their relationship with me too. It's us co-collaborating, experiencing that together, and talking about what it's like to watch that TED Talk, or to explore that product site, or whatever it is we're working on. It's their relationship with themselves, with me, and with the internet. So, any questions, comments, feedback? I'm super open. This is like the first time I've cultivated what I do and put it into words and tossed it out to a group of professionals, and I'm open to anything.
So, give examples of, in the session, if you're on secure video, you have your clients see the screen, using technology right then and there. Like, how do you do it? What are some examples of what it looks like?
Okay, so depends on what we're working on, whether we're working on the story or the relationships. So if it's about their relationship with their partner, we might pull up a TED Talk on communication or a YouTube video on communication, and we might role model that communication with this. So this is like an individual session, or I might pull up a YouTube video on communication and have them, they watch the short clip with me, and then they enact, and I'll have a handout that corresponds with that YouTube video from the internet, and have them enact that. So like that would be like if it was a relationship between a couple around communication. So I might pull up a good example of Imago, right? Because there's a lot of bad examples out there of Imago.
So you would have that identified in advance? If you have it in file, or you...
Yeah, I have a lot of this access. Sometimes I'm on the fly, right? Like sometimes I'm like, ooh, let me just Google this right now. I screen share a lot of this process, because part of that is learning to discriminate the information too. So my mind thinks differently. Like, how am I going to put this in Google to get the kind of information that I want? I think this is essential, because a lot of people don't have access to the information because they don't know how to find the information. So having them watch my process of finding the information is part of the therapeutic intervention too.
So mine's more of an observation than a question. What I hear you say when you're talking about your model is really like kind of a narrative structure around like restoring what story you're telling. So incorporating kind of that experiential piece, that art therapy piece. Show me a picture. Show me an image. Show me something that models what you're feeling. In the same way you might say, let's not use words, right? And then also on top of that, I lost the last piece there. I'm so sorry. Is that do those two students who match?
Yeah, this is like most models of therapy are not brand new, right? We're just sort of recycling kind of aspects of certain models and putting them into like, this is emotionally focused couples therapy. This is a model. It's all the same. It really is. I am not presenting like the World's Fair, brand new invention. This is a coordination of other theories plus something that doesn't exist, which is internet as an intervention, really. As an intervention, not as a resource, if that makes sense, right? Like, so yes, you're absolutely right. Very narrative, very relational, a lot of systemic thinking.
And also educational, especially around how to access media and giving people appropriate use. So it's like, you know, how do we protect ourselves, and so we're not being influenced by going down those dark paths.
Totally, yes. This is kind of a coordination of a bunch of like, kind of like an eclectic approach. So I appreciate pointing that out, because those are some of my fundamental core models of in-person therapy. It just looks a little different in this model. And I guess I will be clear that not all clients I use this model for. Some clients I do, but not all I do. Like, this model is great for adolescents. Really, really good for adolescents, because they're already using the internet, and this is a way to therapeutically reframe the internet in a beneficial way. But like couples is not always the best. I may use aspects of this particular model, but you're 100% right. There's narrative foundations, there's systemic foundations, internal family systems, expressive art, Imago communication dialogue, all that kind of stuff kind of builds in, and this is kind of, you know, I think the difference is that we view the problem differently, like, and we view the solution and change a little differently than some of those models, but not much difference. Thank you. Other questions or comments?
I think this is absolutely fantastic. And I'm so happy that you come up with it and you put it into
really like what you said too, which is like real time. Remember, this model talks about like life happens in real time. It doesn't happen like, because how many of our clients will give an assignment and they don't do it? Like half, probably half my clients don't want to do an assignment. And I think we have to change our view of what we think that 50 minutes needs to look like and what really would be valuable for them. Would it be more valuable for them to figure out how a sex therapist searches for information versus how a consumer who has no sexuality training? Because like I could type in anything and just find myself in porn. And I'm not anti-porn at all, but that's not what you're looking for. Porn is an expression, it's theater. It's erotic theater, okay? Some of it's great, some of it is awful, all right? But that's not what they're looking for. Like they're not looking, when we're looking about accessing accurate information, we're looking for information, not necessarily erotic theater. Be like looking up for facts versus watching a movie. It's a story, which may contribute to the other goal. So pornography may be a really good intervention for creating a healthier story. You know, so, but thank you. And I would love to hear, like, this is enough. It really is enough. You could follow what I just write and be very effective intervening with a client. You don't have to do anything fancier than that. Or like, because sometimes I feel like, oh, I gotta do all this other stuff. But like, some of the best therapy models just stick to like 4 basic interventions and you'll facilitate change. Because it isn't about, like, there is the art of therapy, but there's also just the effectiveness, like just do what works. If you did this, this is often enough. And it's often intensive enough too, around that relationship effect building. So like online dating is a really good example of an intervention. As people build relationships, online dating is an excellent way to, and it's a lot of the only way that they are building relationships, through that ritual of finding a profile, figuring out how that profile makes them feel, connecting to that person, appropriately using, like, not being like you up or sending a dick pic, but being like, I like your profile. And honestly, a lot of people need that intervention. They don't have that ability to connect in a communicative way, and part of our therapeutic process is helping them and teaching them how to do it. And it is enough, not for everybody, but it is enough.
This is also really about that. Do you have, so when people come in for in-person sessions, you can figure out payment right then and there. Do you have a special way of doing that so that someone doesn't just have their session with you and then log off?
Yeah, so the first session I take credit card and then I keep it on file. And honestly, as much as I spend like so much money on credit card fees, it's so worth it, because at the end of 2017, I had no outstanding accounts. And when I was accepting checks, cash, and credit card, I always was tracking down people. And so to me, it hurts. Like, it's several $1,000s a year in credit card fees. It does hurt, but I also never have had to use a collections company. I've never had to track anybody down. The only time I don't get paid is when they make an appointment or first appointment and don't show up. Then I don't have access to their credit card, but I keep it all on file. And I don't recommend my system. I think they charge me too much, but I think I pay for the convenience of it because it's integrated into their file. So I don't have like a separate billing system and a separate health. It's all the same thing. So I think I probably pay a little bit more in credit card fees, but I never track down any money.
I'm just wondering if it's more complicated versus actually in person.
I've never had anyone dine and dash. I've never had anyone dine and dash a session. They're like, bye! And probably that's because I'm probably a pretty good salesman after that first session. Because I want someone in their first session to understand like what it is that I think is going on. I have another model of assessment. A lot of what we do here is we'll do the assessments together. So any of the basic assessments are all on my website. It's basic sexual inventory. We do those things together because remember, it's not just changing their story, it's building their relationship with me. And sending them off to just do it is a lot different than us doing it together. In this model, with the relationship with me, I will use myself a little more. A lot about like my internet, like, oh, I saw this great TED Talk the other day, like, or a lot about like my own internet behavior too. I will use self a little bit more because I do believe, and I think private practice allows you to be a little bit more relational with your clients in a community agency setting. Also the populations themselves, like, I don't get very many bad clients. Like, I think they just weed themselves out. It's like a universe thing. Okay, one more question?
You haven't talked much about like insurance. Do you
accept any insurance. I stopped my last panel in 2016, and I love my life because of it. But I would say that like it was a path that I had to cross. Like you have to pay your dues, right? The recent legislation in Texas, Governor Abbott actually makes it mandatory. They do have to pay for telemedicine. Now, as far as outpatient mental health, the best thing you can do is just call the panel and speak to your provider representative and say, I offer telemental health for this panel. Tell me how I need to code it and need to bill it. Your CPT codes are the same. So generally we're all using like 90791, which is an assessment, and 90837 or 90834. But your modifying codes is where it would say that it was telemedicine or not. For Blue Cross Blue Shield, I do believe they use the modifying code GT. For everybody else, they use the modifying code 95. And I just use 95 for everybody in case anyone wants to submit. I'd say about 2/3 of my clients do get reimbursed from their out-of-network benefits. The office code, there's some controversy about this because like technically I'm in the office and whatever, but I use 11, which is standard office code. And whether you bill insurance or not, these are codes that your super bills need to have so that your clients can successfully reimburse. The only trouble that my clients have ever had with getting reimbursed for telemedicine services has to do with some insurance companies require an extra certification for the 90837 code, but they will pay for the 90834. It's a difference between 45 minutes and 53 to 60 minutes. It's just a time thing. It's not about the telemedicine. Governor Abbott made it so that telemedicine is required. Excuse me. We're really lucky in Texas because the Texas Medical Board really pushed to not increase regulations around telemedicine. And we don't have the money as mental health professionals, but they do. So I know my insurance company now offers free telemedicine. 24/7 I can call a nurse. And that's required and that's paid for by my company. So we're really in a great time to be doing this. And I hope, if there's something I've been able to instill, is to do it. Get out there and do this. Like, it's really exciting to offer therapy to someone who normally would not have access to it. It's, again, the online my model is it needs to be accessible and convenient. Like, they cannot be spending more time in the car than they are in the session. That doesn't make sense to me. That would drive me up the wall if I had to take 3 hours to commute or whatever to get to my therapy session, which was 1 hour. So that is essential. It's got to be convenient. They're more consistent. They see you during lunch hour. They'll see you in their car. It's a very confidential space. I make sure there's no distracted therapy. Like no chatting, no crying while you're driving. Like, so my clients know, like, I make them stop. If they're like, I'm almost at the parking lot, I tell them to call me back. I do not talk therapy while they're driving. But yeah, like, just give it a shot. I really want to have, like, especially around sex therapists. Oh, the last thing I'll say, and then I'll actually finish because I'm out of time, is I have an online sex therapist group. This is only for people who are actually doing online sex therapy, not for people who want to. It's a Facebook group, it's closed. If you're interested in joining it, just send me a message. But you have to be doing it because a lot of online therapist groups are people that want to get into it. They have all these big ideas. They ask the same questions over and over again. As an AASECT sex therapist, I want to streamline this and just make a full referral source of just like, here are the people that do it. They're ready to go. Their systems are ready. They have a payment, like everything's set. So when I get a client that calls from Utah, I can just go on there, type in Utah, and someone comes up. And so ultimately my goal is to just build a massive network of sex therapists in all the states. So we don't really have to worry about jurisdictional line crossing. You can just say, go to my colleague. Like, I had a Rhode Island client who was like, will you see me? And I just said, just go to my colleague. And that felt good to send them to someone. Instead of saying, I can't help you, you can say, go to my colleague, this person. So, and then you don't have to worry about those jurisdictional stuff. I will post my response to the international thing, but we are, in case that you're interested, I'm out of time. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, please email me if you have any questions.